Today's guest moves from Albania to Baton Rouge at age 15, ends up at Harvard for an MBA, and she shared an office wall with Bill Gates. What a story. Don't miss it. Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Very, very excited to welcome Rudina Seseri, founder and managing partner of Glasswing Ventures. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
All the way from Boston.
Indeed. Not that far away, but yes, from Boston.
And battling the weather all the way.
Yeah. But here we are.
We're filming this in early November. And of course, in Dallas, we're having tornado issues and warnings and things. So you all had to rearrange your flights yesterday. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. And I was promised 80-degree weather. So can you please talk to the powers that be?
If you'd been here 2 days ago, you would have had 80 degrees.
Well, I won't complain too much. I left 30-degree weather in Boston. So I'll consider this a treat nonetheless.
Correct. Winter has set in Boston, it sounds like. So, well, tell us about you. Where are you from?
So I'm originally from Albania, Tirana. Was born and raised there for my early childhood and early teenage years. And then I came to the States for my studies by myself at the age of 16. And in fact, I started in the South. I came to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, if you can believe it.
From Albania to Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
If I had a penny for every time I get that reaction. Yes. So that was an interesting culture change and a bit of a shock.
So were you in high school when
Yes. And skipped a couple of grades. And then post high school, I went to Wellesley College, so moved north, and kind of Boston and that surrounding area became my home in that I left and came back several times, but that's where I've established roots. So went to Wellesley College.
But I got to pause there.
Yeah.
How did you find, or your family find, Baton Rouge?
So it was actually through, I was basically looking for a school in the U.S. and there was some leftover funding where I was interpreting as a teenager and through USAID and other places. And I took a test and next thing I know, I'm here. Incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
All right.
Look, by the way, as a pause, especially when you have brain gain, i.e. highly educated people, life-changing experience entirely in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So then how do you find Wellesley?
So Albania is a very tiny country and it's not like there are many of them across the U.S. So I found a relative to my brother-in-law, I couldn't make this up, who lived in Boston and reached out to them. It was the closest I had to family. And so I spent Christmas with them and shared that I was applying to colleges. And he said that every smart woman he had dated had gone to Wellesley. So I had to check the school out. And this was, again, Christmas time, and most college applications are right around that time. So I was convinced that I had missed the deadline. But I got to campus. We found out that the deadline was January 15th. So I had a few weeks and 2 weeks. And then we asked whether there were any opportunities for an interview since I was on campus. Mm-hmm. And they said no. So we took the tour nonetheless. And I came back and they said, hey, someone canceled.
No way.
2 hours from now. Do you want that spot? So of course, back then, this is, the late 90s. The internet was just emerging. So I just grabbed the brochures and was reading on this impromptu preparation and did the interview. Was admitted and full scholarship. So quite indebted to that school.
That's incredible. So when you moved to Baton Rouge, like you were by yourself?
By myself.
Yeah. And so what was the big learning that happened for you at that time? I mean, that had to be very formative.
Yeah, very formative. Honestly, when you get thrown sort of in that situation, you grow up overnight. So, teenage years and the rebellion ended right there. If there was any,
There was no time for
there
that.
was no time
Really
for that.
interesting. Yeah.
You learn to become self-sufficient. I was placed with a couple of families, and that's probably that developed a flexibility and quick to adjust skill, which honestly manifests itself in resilience. The first family I was with, they were incredibly sort of forthcoming and wonderful. There were financial challenges, so then I was placed with another family. The father lost the job there, and there were so literally I had to rotate amongst three families.
Wow.
And again, as a young teenager, as I look back, I would never want to have an 11-year-old daughter. I would never want my daughter to go through that. But while you're in the tunnel, there is a lot of learning that goes on, and that resilience and navigating, college applications in the senior year, initially a first school, the Southern draw. I mean, you learn proper English. So the joke when I would return for the summers to visit my family was that, and I had American friends who were in Albania, that I spoke English with an Albanian accent and a Southern draw. So I had the yaw down. I lost it over time.
That's funny. Yeah,
So did
that's
you
cute.
do one school year there or two school years?
Two school years.
And you mentioned your brother-in-law was in the Boston area. So when you moved here, though, you had no family in the U.S.?
None, and it wasn't my brother-in-law. It was a relative to my brother-in-law. So
okay.
really, I was stretching there,
Man,
but
yeah.
No family whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any? Who's your family now? Do you have any family in the United
I
States?
mean, my husband and my daughter. I have a niece who, also went to school. So, and our friends. So we've made a family.
Amazing. Where'd you and your husband meet?
Wellesley College. So he was a law student at BU. He'd come from Switzerland. He's Albanian by background, not any intention on marrying an Albanian or not. But we met when he was a law student at BU. So we're a long, boring married couple, even though we're young in age. But started dating between my freshman and sophomore year of college. And here we are.
Incredible.
great.
What was your first date? Where'd y'all meet?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. We got to get
This is
into it.
grilled. What is this due diligence? You've committed to the funds
Come
already.
on, Pete. We love to know. Is it a bar? It's a who knows what. Where'd y'all meet?
So no, not a bar. No bar hopping or picking in that regard. Picking up. We met at Wellesley College actually. So I had done an internship for a lobbying group in DC that summer, kind of trying to figure out between my freshman and sophomore year. And my husband was just wrapping up his law degree and was trying to figure out whether he wanted to go down sort of the government path or the commercial path. And so we were introduced, and he came over to Wellesley. I finished my DC internship and then was working as a research assistant for one of the professors for the rest of the summer. And so we met in Wellesley, and it's kind of a funny story now that you asked. Because there is a beautiful lake that goes around the college, and half the lake, I believe, is owned by the Honeywell family and half the lake by the college. And the rule is that if you walk with a boyfriend 3 times and he doesn't ask you to marry him, you can shove him in. So I was doing the tour guide, and here's this building, and then it's a beautiful campus, and here's the lake. And he goes, "Can we change the rule from 3 to 1 time and walk it now?" I was like, wow, that's pretty brave on the first date. So here we are.
I love that. I love
that's
that.
great.
Tell us about your daughter. How old is she, and what is she into?
So Livia Amelie is her name. She goes by Livy. She's 11. She is her mother's daughter, I think, in many regards, quite determined. I hope quite strong-willed. I hope it helps out in life. Not always the easiest to parent, but
It'll work out for everybody else. It'll be a challenge for you and your husband, but it'll work out for her.
That's okay, as long as it works out for her. She's a straight A student. She goes to Meadowbrook School of Weston, which is a top-tier school, private school. So she's very artistic. I think she plays club soccer, which is competitive, but I think that's more to be in a team setting. Mm-hmm. I think her real sort of calling is performing arts. So she does voice, and it's a mezzo-soprano, albeit we will know more a bit later in life as to what her voice is really like, and piano. But she's also a theater performer. In fact, I was sharing with your team last night with Brian and Mac on the investment side that she's done a lot of theater, musical theater, community performances, but we did an audition this summer for a professional equity theater is the lingo. It's news to me, like all this performing theater lingo. And out of 100 and some kids, she got the lead role.
Wow.
Congratulations. That's incredible.
Yeah. So the rule in the family is now she's going to prepare. So it's January, very intense, like 4 hours a day during school nights, and then 7 or so hours each weekend of rehearsals. So the rule is 1 A- and we're done.
Wow.
Hardcore mom.
So
Yeah.
B pluses are allowed?
No. Nice way to invert it. Nice attempt over there, Doc.
Yeah.
So she got the lead. Maybe if you said I missed it, and what's the?
It's Flora and Ulysses. So there is she's a wonderful children's book author.
Okay, yeah.
So like she does I'm trying to remember, there is a Marcy Watkins or some last name like that, a Little Pig series, like all along the age groups. And Flora and Ulysses, the main character is an 11-year-old, or 10-year-old, I can't remember, Flora girl. And Ulysses is her squirrel, I believe, friend.
Yes.
But it's all about friendships.
Aww.
And then the rest of the cast is all adult professional actors.
Yeah.
But
That's
it's a
great.
wonderful book.
Yeah.
And turned now into a play.
Exciting. Yes.
It's incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
You're very proud, I know.
Yeah, it's funny for all that we achieve in life, when it comes to children. I think they always end up being our biggest achievement.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Very well said.
Where does she get her creative performing art
Her
skills from? Is that
her
from
father,
you? From,
Her father. No,
Yeah.
no, she gets other things from me.
Not that.
I am not. No, that's not one of my.
So you're not
talents.
singing mezzo soprano in the car, and
If I did, you'd be very sorry.
that's awesome. All right, so you're is it Wellesley? Is that how I say
Yes.
it? Yep. Around the Boston area.
Right,
Is it
yep,
in
about-
Boston?
12 miles outside of
Okay.
Boston. In fact,
All right.
it's funny because I've come full circle. I went to the college that's named after the town, then went away to investment bank in other parts, Microsoft in other parts of the country in my career, and have come back and live in the town where I went to college.
Yeah, that's great.
Incredible.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So walk us through you graduate and kind of walk us through early career and what's beginning to attract you. What are you liking, disliking? Walk us through those early years.
So, because I was graduating from Wellesley, I was trying to figure out sort of what I was passionate about, and very intrigued by finance and investment banking. This is the late 90s, early 2000 type time frame. And so there was that wave, if you will, of influence. And then, of course, the internet, the web was invented, the internet has emerged. So, tech has its own moment of, boom,
Yeah.
bubble and burst
Yeah.
ultimately. But so I was looking to combine the two, and that's exactly the path I went. So I joined Credit Suisse First Boston, as it was called at the time, when Frank Quatron's technology group. I don't know if the name rings a bell, but a very, very famous Wall Street investment banking team particularly focused on technology. In fact, today, it's an independent firm called Catalyst with a Q, and again, leading all M&A, sort of at the top of the top. So an incredible experience there. I was there for 3 years, so the 2-year analyst program, and then got promoted for a 3rd year, and focused particularly on semiconductors and the hardware side, interestingly, which in retrospect turned out to be a wise decision, because while I was there, the bubble burst and the internet stocks kind of went down the drain. It was really more of the hardware and semiconductors that persisted through that correctionary environment, which in turn meant more transactional experience for me, both on the financing, LBO, leverage buyouts, and M&A.
What are some, as you look back, what are some business principles you're learning in that? Professional takeaways, those however many 3, 4, 5 years. What are some observations, takeaways from that?
So it was an interesting time, a lot of learnings. I actually talked quite a bit about this period because while not very, very long in duration, just 3 years, it's those formative years and it's your first working experience. And I'll start with work ethic. Investment banking hours are long. 120-hour weeks, and this notion of the numbers matter, the strategy matters. So that was really important. And then it almost got reinforced in many ways by the correction that happened because this group went from 600 investment bankers to 100 while I was there.
Wow.
So I survived about 5 rounds of layoffs. And that honestly affects your psyche and how you approach work, where you basically say, there will be zero chance that I fail on account of my doing. I don't control everything in life, but I will certainly not leave any T's uncrossed and I's not dotted on account of my effort. So this notion of very strong work ethic and very strong output. So not just the effort, but also the output. That was very, very formative for me.
Well, and Rudina, I mean, what you just said right there, the personal accountability, control what you can control. You literally watched, obviously, whatever percentage that is, 500 out of 600 people get fired. And what you took away from that is, I can only control what I can control, and I'm going to be the best at what I can possibly be.
And leave no room for mistakes that are self-generated.
Right.
You know, if I can go the extra mile, I'll give you a perfect example. So the banker who was running the semiconductor group, a gentleman by the name of David Wah, who ultimately ran, all of investment banking America, and now continues to be a very senior banker at PJT. Sort of made this comment, not to me, but I found out years later. So I was leaving the group. I'd been accepted at the Harvard Business School, wasn't going to take an associate promotion, was going to pursue my MBA. And I was leaving in 3 days. In the meantime, banking hours for an analyst or senior analyst, as my title was at that point, are, you're printing the books, the pitch books, and at 6 a.m., I got in a car and drove them and handed them to him at LaGuardia and then went home. And it was 3 days before I was going to leave the office and the job. And I guess the reviews were coming up. So it was the, junior bankers get paid on sort of summer ends rather than the typical fiscal year. And as they were ranking analysts, because I was leaving, I wasn't, the top, I was getting dropped. And he turned around and told, the committee, wait a minute, she just dropped the books, 3 days before she leaves at 6 a.m., having pulled an all-nighter. There's no way. So I was told that years later and never by him, but I shared that to kind of both. I try to not leave room and all the way to the end. And also the lesson that, people notice and appreciate, and this mentorship and the sponsorship matter in your life and career.
Yeah.
You finished strong, even in that.
Yeah.
So you then go to Harvard Business School, and walk us through that and kind of what motivated that decision.
Yeah, 2 things before you go there.
Yeah.
So I have to jump in because Doug always he's a hog, so I have to jump in when I can. So you mentioned back when you were at Wellesley, you were trying to decide what you were passionate about.
Yeah.
So I just want to pick back up on that thread. As you were doing all this investment banking work as an analyst, a senior analyst, did you find that you were passionate about that, or did you find in that gosh, there's things here that I really do love, but there are a lot of things that I don't love. And then how did that spur you on to get to Harvard?
So I will tie that back with Doug's original question, so you don't feel excluded around what were 2 or 3 things. Because the other piece that I discovered there is how much I love technology.
Yeah.
Oh.
So what made this tech group particularly unique was the fact that we went deep in the tech. Like we could go, it wasn't simply about cranking a discounted cash flow, building an LBO model, which I liked and I found stimulating. But it was, at the time, I kid you not, I was learning about ASICs, in semiconductors and all DW waves and like all this basically physics for a good chunk of it. And I found that incredibly stimulating to kind of learn what's next and be at the the innovation circle. Kind of think about, oh my gosh, with what I'm underwriting or taking to market, that's getting adopted. It's becoming a bigger company and it's shaping, faster internet access, for example. And as you think about communication equipments. So that piece I found incredibly stimulating, both of how does it work? What are the underpinnings of the technology? And the impact piece. And I appreciate you asking the question because it's also the underpinning of what has shaped what I do today as a VC. I love that. I hated the hours. I think my sleep from that moment I'll never recover. So, but I kind of like the stimulating piece. And again, I found finance stimulating, but I found it a tool more than an output. A tool in evaluation and in informing the decisions rather than it for itself. But I loved structuring. I still do. My joke is, having done M&A even at Microsoft, that I never lost a deal on account of structuring. There's a lot of creativity, not in an accounting way. They're but in how you structure, kind of like I think about a painter that they have a finite way, number of colors, but the various combinations, and you can get a Miro or you can get a Picasso, and they're dramatically different. Similar, I think, with finance and the structuring, there's a lot of room to be creative, and I don't think as an industry it gets enough credit on that piece of our brain and how you utilize it.
Yeah, it's really well said. I think that's sometimes we think structure's not math, but yes, we think creativity has to be a sculpture or a painting, and it's actually innovation in how you think and optionality and all those kind of things, different ways to solve a problem.
Challenges, exactly.
Yeah. So you go to Harvard and you get what degree?
I get an MBA.
Okay.
So when we walk down graduation, different schools have different things they carry. We carry dollars.
Dollars?
So, yes.
That's kind of on brand, though.
Yeah, in a good way or a bad way?
I don't know.
There was a little bit of understating negativity there. I think it's a little silly as well. But Harvard was actually quite an interesting experience because, I didn't go there for finance, for example. It's very general management focused.
Yeah.
And it's really more about what that means is leadership. So. Inspiring followship and knowing when to follow sometimes and when to lead in other times. And so it was really about becoming more well-rounded. Like in the finance and accounting class, I could help others. And then in marketing and other classes, I could learn from others. It's case study method, which is what it is most renowned for, I think. It's quite interesting. You learn to articulate thoughts in a pretty finite amount of time. You learn to building on is a very Harvard expression, to build on other folks and other people's, train of thought so that the conversation can follow. And equally importantly is the network and the breadth of people and section mates and classmates that one interacts with. I mean, in many ways, they've become some of my long-time best friends that came to my wedding and all that, in addition to the Wellesley crew. So I think it was both very formative in expanding my skill set and understanding, ultimately sort of steering you for leadership, as well as the connections and the friendships, not in a transactional way, truly in a relationship, long-term, trusted friendships way.
There's so many points there, and I want to just jump right there for a second because you've watched so many companies, our audience, Rudina, essentially mostly business owners, building companies, leading companies, starting companies, and then exiting companies. Leadership. If you had a room of 100 CEOs or founders, entrepreneurs right now, what are some lessons around leadership? What are some best practices you've seen that you try to operate in Glasswing? Let's chat there for a minute on leadership.
So on leadership in a business context, but perhaps even beyond, I think one, never compromise your ethics. It's very, very tempting, and there will be moments that are hard. But I think stay in the white and don't go near the gray. In putting that aside, really important to understand who your loyalty lies with as a leader. There will always be various lanes of loyalty, and it's a balancing game. We have loyalty to our employees. We have loyalty to our investors or shareholders, right? And that goes with accountability hand in hand. And knowing how you're stack ranking those matters because there are difficult decisions. You have to let go of people, right? And oftentimes, especially, not to jumpstart to what I do today, but as I invest in companies and they go through changes, skill sets, you're hiring the wrong person. Sometimes you have to make changes. It's important to know that there are shareholder dollars or there are investor dollars underpinning those. And we need to, our fiduciary responsibility is to generate that highest return. I mean, if I ask all three of us, not to turn the tables on you gentlemen, but have you ever let go of an employee and said, I did it too soon? I've never. I try to be very effective about it. So, how do you balance that loyalty to your team with doing the right thing for the business and soft landings? So I would say, being aware of how you're prioritizing those is really important. And a culture of performance. Culture, it's such a soft term and yet so important and very difficult to quantify for us, performance and measures-driven people.
Rudina, I'd love for you to, I've never heard cultural performance before because obviously culture we believe it's a total differentiator for True North. I'm sure you do for Glasswing. But what do you mean? I've not heard the phrase cultural performance. What does that mean?
So, oftentimes in the broader corporate America, you kind of get cultures where everyone is so very nice to each other and it's a tight-knit community, but not necessarily prioritizing performance, albeit, there could be some lip service to it. Or you get these cultures that are very, very cutthroat and very high-performing, but almost toxic in nature. We want the balancing act. So a culture where you inspire people, they have skin in the game, in the performance, and we're all motivated to be the best, but we care about each other. I mean, my team, I remind them we are not a cult because my team, especially the junior folks who are not married, are doing brunch with each other on the weekend. My gosh, don't you spend enough time here 5 days in the office together? So, this notion of you can do well and do good and, be positive, but go. Like we have a North Star or the True North, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. I don't know,
exactly.
But, and we are going for it. And so, sometimes you have to make tough decisions, but if you have to, since I picked on that example of letting go, help them land their next job. We've done that. So that graceful exit, being thoughtful, but that's a culture of performance. Caring and being tightly knit doesn't mean that you have to forgo performance or the inverse.
Yeah, they're not binary, right?
They're not binary. But oftentimes they manifest as binary and kind of you have these two stereotypes. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it's doable and important to do it.
And I think, when you think about really the last two conversations here, leadership and culture performance, like the intersection of those two things is really challenging because it is the leader that sets the pace for where is the balance between having a culture where everybody enjoys being together, but then, at the end of the day, we have a job to do and we have a fiduciary responsibility to those we serve. And so how do we make sure all that happens?
Yeah, I think it's such a great point. And just Rudina, it's why I love this conversation. I don't know if I've heard someone respond to leadership, and that's why leadership is unique to each leader, right?
Correct.
You talked about know your ethics, stay within your ethics. And then 2, you went down the conversation of loyalty and then cultural performance. I think it's just so, if we were a sports team and we lost every game, every season, we've got a culture. We have a losing culture. You're probably going to change leaders. Yeah. So I love that balance.
Yeah.
All right. So walk us through, you finish, you get your MBA, begin to walk us through how you kind of get to today. I know there's a lot of years in there, but kind of walk us through. You spent some Microsoft, and then I want to start to get to how Glasswing starts developing.
Sounds lovely. So while I was at Harvard, I chaired the technology conference that Harvard puts, which I think continues to be the largest student-run conference in North America. At the time, it was called Cyberposium. And one of the speakers was a recent Harvard graduate, HBS graduate, in fact, who had also degrees from MIT, grad and undergrad in electrical engineering, a gentleman by the name of Rick Rennell. He was a recent VC, and I'm sharing that because he's my co-founder at Glasswing. So we met during my journey there. He spoke. I did a couple of projects with them. This is a 2003 timeframe. It was actually, I remember the mobile infrastructure landscape because one day we were all going to have smartphones. So
and we do.
So mapping that out. But I did want to go and get operational experience. Coming out of investment banking, you model, right? You're on the roadshow and you're modeling the synergies. But boy, between that Excel file and realizing those synergies, a few oceans run in between, whether it is how you incentivize those people, back to culture and the topics we just covered, how can you expand the customer base, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of wanted to see that piece and joined Microsoft's corporate development team for the summer, and that became a full-time job. And that team at the time was leading acquisitions and investments for the company. So quite exciting.
Yeah.
In fact,
So did you move at this point?
I moved to Seattle. Recently married at the time, so both my husband and I joined Seattle. He became associate deputy counsel for Quellos, which became BlackRock Alternatives while we were there. It was acquired, and I joined Microsoft's corporate development group in Seattle. And again, lots of learnings there, particularly around this piece of the integration. There was a team that focused on the packages, right, for the individuals that we would be bringing in through the acquisitions. Another one focusing on integrating the product. So a lot of learnings.
So your focus is M&A at Microsoft.
And investments, yes.
And investments. Okay.
And I had done, during the summer, I'd actually worked on the strategic sort of plan for launching what became Xbox 360 in Asia, which was fascinating.
Very.
Because, you're going up against Nintendo and Sony at the time with PlayStation. But fundamentally, once it became a full-time role, I was really focusing on those two pieces around M&A, really more acquisitions, not a lot of mergers with Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly.
And investments. The other piece, though, was that it's at the time, and I think it remains to this day, but at the time it was a very high visibility group within Microsoft. It reported to the CFO, but access to Ballmer. And in fact, if you poked a hole through the back wall of my office, you came out to Bill Gates' computer. So I used to joke that I was either in the safest place or the most dangerous place because the windows were bulletproof and Gates had, his bodyguards, and which I would see every morning. And, very cool guys. Like one was an EMT by trade. They were fascinating. But if there was a bullet coming through, it was coming through the glass to my office, then to that wall.
You shared a wall with Bill's office.
Yes, I did. That also had other...
Is he a loud talker? Could you overhear his conversations?
No, but once I had my music. I didn't know. It was late at night. I had my music going and got a knock on the wall.
Seriously? What was the music? Do you remember?
No, and it was during the summer too. When I was an intern, I was like, "Oh dear God, there goes my full-time job."
Yeah.
Or offer.
That's great.
But the other advantage was that Christine, he had a suite as they often do. But Christine, his executive assistant, also had all the tickets to the season. So I was the closest. I could just run and get the tickets to, I think they became the Utah Jazz, but I forget what they were called, but at the time they had a basketball team. So I would get those tickets and, courtside, and people would look funny because they knew that they were Bill and Melinda's tickets at the time. So as a 27-year-old.
It's a great place to sit.
That's right.
That was an excitement point. But anyway.
What are your...
So I have to stop here for 1 second.
Please.
So are your parents still in Albania at this point?
My parents have both passed away,
Okay.
unfortunately. Yes, in Albania. My mom passed away this January, and my father had passed away when I was very young.
Okay.
So.
I'm sorry about that. But when you were at Microsoft, were your parents still alive at this point? Okay. And were you going back and forth to visit Albania and
I
during
was.
holidays? And
Yes, I was about once or twice a year. Yeah.
So how proud must your mom and dad have been of you?
Very, very proud.
Yeah.
Changing the stars. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's funny, I attribute a lot of who I've become to my mother because she chose not to remarry. She was the CFO of the largest enterprise in Albania.
Wow.
Which, so let's take a step back, a little bit of level setting on Albania. It used to be a very tight former communist country, even though it's in Southern Europe, 75 miles away from Italy, but for proximity and for location purposes, and very, very tight.
Mm-hmm.
And to become that senior for a state enterprise without being a member of the Communist Party, in fact, persecuted and prosecuted as a family, because the family had a very anti-communist strain to it, and yet rise on capabilities, made her a very strong woman.
And probably being female at that time as well.
At the time. Actually, it's funny. Communism is an awful, awful system. One thing that they established was equality in the worst and the best of ways.
Yeah, interesting.
The night shift, you're a woman, you're a man. The army, you're a woman, you're a man, you're kind of going. So there was an element of that, but still, I think a lot of it, there was a lot more discrimination on account of being anti-communist,
than being a woman.
Than being a woman in a strange way. But she, and this was the enterprise that produced all meat and dairy products and byproducts. And you can imagine, you have a salmonella break, people go to jail and get shot. There was no, I lost my job.
Right.
It's, very deterministic and serious. So in that regard, very strong woman. So when the opportunity, not to go back to the initial conversation, emerged for me to come to the States, I didn't have a passport. I'm this 15-year-old and from a very closed country, and it was my mom, go, go, go. This is your opportunity, which very brave of her. I don't know if you have children, how old they are, but imagine just kind of sending your kid out there.
And sacrificial. She knew her time with you
was over.
Essentially. Yeah. And I don't know that I could make that sacrifice in full candor. And so to come back to the question, incredible pride in changing, not just changing my career, but sort of at the top of the fields I was pursuing. And in fact, also giving back. I was the first one to actually get Microsoft to open an office in the country.
Oh, wow.
No way.
So just sort of this notion of doing well and doing good.
Yes. Amazing. So I want to say one thing. We're recording this on election day.
Oh boy.
And it just strikes me like, what a great American story. What a great, just, with all the sort of conflict that we have around the country today, like at the end of the day, like this is a great country 100%. And look at the opportunity that's been provided for you. And what a great story.
I mean, it is the land of opportunities.
Yes.
It is still the country where one can jump social economic stratas, whereas in Europe and other places, that was long shot centuries ago. And it's a country where ingenuity, hard work, innovation lead to transformative outcomes.
Yes.
No matter what one's political beliefs are.
That's right. That's right. Awesome.
No, it's incredible. You have siblings?
I have a sister.
Yeah,
She is about 12 years older than I am. She is the general. She works in the government, but civil engineer by training.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
Albania. High achieving herself. She is the general director for national emergencies, water transport, and waste management for the country.
Wow. Good night.
Yeah.
You guys are a talented family and resilient.
Strong mother.
Yes. Was there any thought that your mom might move to?
She was coming and going.
Yeah.
It's very hard when you're older in life. Kind of, you'd have to have really.
And that's her home. That's
her friends and everything
exactly.
was there.
All right.
So back to the present.
So 100%. So you're sitting next to Bill Gates and you're eavesdropping.
Not quite. No,
on the other side of the wall.
Yeah. No big brother watching
Spent
here.
your entire day like, we can just talk a little louder.
No. I was crunching numbers and negotiating
all right,
term
because I want to get to Glasswing and AI and so many things. But let me how many years are you at Microsoft?
Short window, a couple of years.
Okay.
And quite high volume of transactions undertaken and closed. And then the gentleman that I referenced, Rick Grinnell, calls and says, hey, you know how you did the projects with us? We are raising, the firm was Fairhaven Capital. We're raising a new fund. It looks like it will be oversubscribed. We had talked about you potentially coming in 5 years. How about now? So I uprooted myself, moved back to Boston, and basically joined the firm. And Rick Grinnell and I were very much tied to the hip, as the saying goes, in investing in companies.
This is Glasswing.
Nope. This is Fairhaven.
Okay, this is before.
Firm,
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Where we were leveraging the transformational technologies, particularly frontier tech, defined as really cutting edge, but that can gain adoption within 3 to 5 years to become mass market for enterprise and security.
Okay.
And so along that journey, around the 2010 timeframe, we started noticing something was happening around frontier tech. It wasn't about SaaS. It wasn't just about advanced analytics and predictives. There was something else that was going on. And we're thesis-driven investors. So what we came to conclude through our research and thesis work was that we had entered a new era in AI. And again, this is 2010. This is not the flavor du jour ChatGPT, where we were moving from what's known as classical machine learning. If AI is the output of human-like intelligence delivered by technology, the how, for the grand majority of it, is machine learning. And we had machine learning, regression, K-means, clustering. Those are all machine learning, actually, are techniques and sub-architectures. But we had moved on to a new era with deep learning or neural nets. Now, I'll give you a very oversimplified sort of definition of what that meant, just for some level setting.
It's good that you know your audience. That's we need oversimplification.
Actually, that's not truly why I'm doing it.
No, I'm teasing. We do need it.
The reason I do it is because in tech, we love to speak in 3-letter acronyms.
Yes.
And it's almost like a means of intimidating. And in fact, I think it's actually shows that we don't know it well enough.
Yes,
so if
well
you can't
said.
explain it in plain English, what
Correct.
are you doing? But so in plain English, or my attempt at it anyway, with traditional or classical machine learning, you have a pretty well-defined data set. It has all the features. It's pretty well understood, not terribly large, that goes through a regression, let's just say, to deliver the output. It's technically machine learning, and it's all very neat and well-defined. What was invented at the University of Toronto in 2007 with deep learning and neural nets, in fact, I think the Nobel Prize Award was just awarded for that to Jeffrey Hinton, is that we could now take very large, cumbersome, ill-defined data sets and put them through these, algorithms that, they're referred to as neural nets, sort of paying homage to our brain, although it doesn't work at all like our brain, but these nodes that were very powerful and could run very sophisticated sort of algorithms or be the basis of these algorithms to deliver powerful outputs. So we went from a straight line to these nodes and the outputs. That changed the entire game, if you will, when it comes to AI and frontier tech. So that occurred in academia in 2007. We started seeing the early adoption in 2010 in industry, and then started building a portfolio of AI native companies. By 2015, early 16, it was plenty evident to us that AI was going to be all disruptive. And conveniently, we had built a portfolio that was doing very, very well with these companies. So Rick and I decided to spin out and set up Glasswing Ventures, which is basically an early stage first capital in strategy, very much similar to our prior firm in that regard, but more focused on the application of AI and frontier technologies as they come. You can think quantum and whatever else follows, to solve problems for the enterprise and the security markets.
Okay. Do you see yourself as an entrepreneur?
Very much so. I mean, if you think about, I tell my tech founders, when they walk in a room and they're pitching, let's say, for funding, they have a demo of a product, of a software they have coded. I walk in and I say, hello, gentlemen, here's my track record. Want to put some money in the fund? I'm joking, but not. And so it has the element of fundraising. It has the element of building a firm, back to the leadership considerations and incentives. One of the ways to inspire people is to align incentives. In my firm, from the executive assistant all the way to my co-founder and myself, everyone gets carry. That's important. You know, it's if we're going to work hard, we've got to have upside. It speaks actually to that entrepreneurial spirit that's so very American.
Absolutely.
That's not always the case, though. It's actually a rarity in alternatives that non-partners, especially more supportive roles, get access to carry. But when you start back to the entrepreneur question, you're literally, I joke that you're the custodian and the managing partner and the analyst. And then you build a team from there. So very, very much so.
How many team members do you have at Glasswing?
So we are a very large team when you think about the industry and the area that we focus on. It's a team of 15. Usually for early stage venture in the size of funds that we raise, which are sort of in the 100 to 160 million type range, you have a couple of partners and a junior person and a back office. We've taken a different approach. For every function of a technology company, particularly frontier tech company, we have a partner and a non-partner, but a partner in particular that has led that function multiple fold over. So, one of our partners, Cleda Martiro, she is a chief data scientist by background and has led product. Our partner, Vlad Shanoha, was the CTO of Nuance. Nuance exited Microsoft after I had left for $20 billion. So anything around speech recognition, Dragon is their very famous product. And in fact, they developed the product that powers Siri for Apple. So very high powered sort of team. And he's extremely unique in that he has both led AI before AI was, a thing, and scaled it at an enterprise level. Very hard to find that type of talent in this current, phase of the market adoption. We have go-to-market operating partners. Think about when we make an investment, what are the first things that the founders, 2 or 3 founders and some developers, they got to build out the leadership team. They got to get those first few logos of, design partners. I don't like to call them customers until you really know you have product market fit. And getting the wrong logos is just as painful as not getting the right logos. It's wasted dollars, wasted resources, wasted features that have been developed. So we are very much view ourselves as an extension to the team in helping those founders. And then the areas that we focus on with our team are also important. So within enterprise, we're focusing on areas like how do you make your data cheaper, better, faster. The whole world is focused on, large language models. If you hear, the talk around AI or foundation models. Algorithms, there are many, many ways to approach building an AI native product and algorithm. The delta ultimately comes from the data and the type of data access that you have. You don't need to own the data, but you need to access it to train the models. So how can we make that exercise cheaper, better, faster? Or automation of mundane tasks so that we have human augmentation, or securing the enterprise, whether it's literally physical security or cyber.
So today, how many funds do you guys have? Which fund are you on, and kind of where are you in the?
We have raised and are deploying out of our second fund.
Okay.
I can't speak to the third because we have a qualified purchaser criteria, and this is a broad audience.
Yes, perfect. And then what's the criteria for the types of companies that you're trying to invest in? And talk to us a little bit about your thesis.
Absolutely.
And then we've got some more questions for you around AI.
Yeah, please fire them my way. So the thesis is actually looking at companies and investing in companies that leverage AI to solve problems that have largely been unaddressable today. Because building an AI native company, it's hard. It's actually harder than building your run-of-the-mill SaaS software company. So if you can solve it with SaaS, by all means, don't bother with AI, because you have to get the data, which is, again, I've said several times, quite unruly with the algorithm. So that setup effort, it's bigger and it requires more talent and a different type of talent. You don't just have the coding, the CTO or the coders and developers and the go-to-market, typically the CEO. You also have that third leg to the stool, the data scientists. And they tend to be perfectionists while you're trying to get the product out. So both to the team and the culture and to the actual building of the software, the setup effort is higher. So therefore, you better be solving a problem that's meaningful with a meaningful budget that otherwise is unaddressable.
Yeah.
And so in that regard, like I said, we're looking at AI companies that are solving the data problem. We have a vertical industries thesis, really looking at supply chain, manufacturing, sort of almost old industries where tech was a dirty word, but now it's become transformative all the way to construction. There is a lot of opportunity in those verticals. But for us in our strategy, so we're thesis driven, and I've just highlighted a couple of our theses. Secondly, we seek to be first capital in. So we're writing that first $2 to $2.5 million check for 10 to 20% ownership. I like to say we go early and we go long. We don't take a sort of index fund approach where here's the dollar, see you, and I'm going to spread myself thinly. We have a concentrated portfolio, typically 20 or so companies, maybe 22 in later funds. And we take board seats. So there is governance structures from the very beginning. And we maintain very healthy reserves. So we protect our investment, in the A, Series B, and beyond. So that's important. And then as I tell the team, just because we're on the board and have invested the dollars, if we go with that mindset and expect of the founders, is the wrong mindset, especially for early stage. So in fact, I'll share something somewhat confidential. When we have our partner meetings, so we have Monday partner meetings where we review the pipeline for new companies and new opportunities, and Friday where we review our portfolio companies. And on Fridays, we have this two-sided document. On the one side is what each company, our performance, struggles, talent, customers, all that, cash needs. On the other side is what have we done for that company since our last discussion in each of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And, you lead by example.
That's right.
So how I help my companies informs how the junior people, they follow, their leader, but also accountability, how the leads on each of their deals are being measured and held accountable also informs the culture. So that's sort of the approach that we take. Customer introductions. In fact, we win deals. Oftentimes, we're not the highest bidder, and you can, basically do the invert of the arithmetic and know that we're not paying more than 20 million or so, maybe 25 posts for the rounds that we go in. So we will not be the highest bidder, but we often bring a customer right off the bat, oftentimes before we've issued the term sheet.
Yeah.
So that makes us the most value-add investor.
Right.
Yeah,
great.
That would be your differentiator or one of them. What do you?
Amongst others, I mean, the fact that we get on the calls or in meetings with founders and we go toe-to-toe with them on the AI piece is probably the first differentiator. I have a portfolio company.
But real quick, what do you mean by toe-to-toe with that?
Meaning that most founders in any frontier technology get on a call with the investor, even venture capitalists, and they're having to educate them
Correct.
on the technology.
They know a lot more than the investor.
Not in our case.
Yep. Gotcha.
And in fact, we're asking, let me put it this way. The joke in the office is that if we are in a meeting with a founder, it has been 5 minutes and they don't go, oh my God, I don't have to explain this to you. And you're actually challenging my thinking. We have failed. Yep. We kind of get high on that comment.
That's good.
And so I think that's the first differentiator. The immediate next is sort of how we are their first call and become the first call for our founders in good and bad times. And we earn that by truly adding value. And in the early days, it's customers and talent. And in later days, it's partnerships and strategic, opening doors for acquisition. So all along the journey of starting a company through the exit phase. So I think that that becomes a key differentiator. And then we are not convenience investors.
Yeah.
We are responsible investors, back to the fiduciary point, and it's not a charity, and you know when to cut your losses, but we help our companies exit. It's early stage. There will absolutely be failures. If they're not, our LPs are making the wrong bet because we would not be taking enough risk. But even in those cases, how you lend the company, what do you recover matters.
We mentioned this a minute ago. So many of the people who listen to Decision Points are business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs. You've seen so many reps, so many different leaders. Rudina, what are some common mistakes that you've seen or blind spots? What are common traits of the best entrepreneurs you have seen?
Some of the best traits are this determination. I don't know if I quite have the vocabulary to fully articulate it, but they are so single-minded and determined to win, and then they get creative. I joke that some of the best founders, even when they're starting with small markets, like they're squeezing blood out of mosquitoes, somehow they manage to expand the market, going to other facets of their TAM, of their total addressable market, and just build a long-lasting entity, while others could have the wind at their back. But there's that part is charisma, part is hard work, part is thinking outside the box, that unpredictable, not in an unpredictable in a governance way, but how they respond to competition, how they take market share, how they, again, grow the pie. That is incredible. And I think it's the determination and resilience. And it also goes hand in hand with self-awareness. Because, part of the failure is also the determination, not knowing when to give up. But if you are self-aware and market aware, you can be more agile in how you adjust and reposition. In tech and in any business, if you have to completely reposition the company, it's not necessarily a good thing, and it's an undertaking and a dangerous one. But every day, we're iterating and positioning and making changes. And that ability to take input without losing sight of your vision and where you're in the true north. I'm 2 for 2.
Good job.
And but also, being proactive and reactive in the appropriate ways. It's I think a key trait of a winning founder and leader and CEO.
Yep.
Talk to us about AI for a second, and kind of, for the novices that are listening, and maybe even the novices that are right here.
I am.
Talk to us a little bit about what we should expect over the next 5 to 10 years with AI, and how it will impact our lives, and maybe the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Happy to. So AI is probably one of the most powerful technologies we have encountered in the last couple of 100 years, and it's not a euphemism. So its impact is already being felt and has been felt actually for some time across all facets of our lives, whether we are aware of it or not. And that's an important point. The reason it has come front of mind, if you will, for all of us at a individual consumer or citizen level, it's what I would call the ChatGPT phenomenon, which basically the application has hit the point of what I call mass consumerization. So there's mass awareness. But AI, as we discussed earlier, has been, technology in the making for a couple of decades, at least in the current form. And so, but now we have this awareness. So in terms of impact, it's transformative. Every facet of our business and our lives, we will have this sort of dynamic of having a co-pilot with us, whether it is our everyday jobs or, our home lives. And then it's here to stay. So I think businesses will be disrupted, businesses will be created on its account, and it will have ramifications on labor and all sorts of other societal facets as well. I think right now it's so very hyped that attributions are being given to it that it does not have. So, there's almost this notion of like it can reason and interact like a human. No. The biggest breakthrough within all the AI breakthroughs, and they're in multitudes, is around, again, generative AI, which basically has given us the ability to interface from a user experience and user interface with technology in a human-like manner. We don't need to be bound. We can just have conversational-like interactions. That has transformed how we consume, utilize, and leverage technology forever. That's probably the biggest transformation. The underpinnings of it, though, have nothing to do with, AI being able to reason like a human. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not coming back anytime soon. There's not there. Again, it's very powerful technology, but it's not that.
Right.
What it is, though, is it's used for good and for bad, much like other technologies are used. So it's not inherently good or bad. Technology doesn't carry those characteristics, but it is very powerful. So the value that it creates and the damage it could create are meaningful. So in that regard, I think I would fully expect to see some degree of regulation, albeit I don't think it would be effective to have sort of widespread regulation, but rather kind of like for healthcare, we have HIPAA evolving within each lane. Because fundamentally, for example, deep fakes with AI, seeing is no longer believing.
Yep.
Right.
That's a fundamental shift to our society.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yep.
how do you protect, right? So there is a need for laws and regulations to catch up with technology. It's always been the case that they lag. But I think that will be important. And it has to be balanced with the hype. The hype is making it sound like I said, I give you the Hollywood type illustrations. There will be a trough of disillusionment, both from it's going to transform us, but not in the speed that the hype is making it sound, and that a lot of good dollars will be thrown after bad opportunities in the name of AI. So at Glasswing, we're very, very thoughtful, and we're regionalists. So I joke that we've already made whatever mistakes we were going to make a couple of decades ago. So from that perspective, the reality will settle in.
Yeah.
Rudina, this has been amazing. Thank you. Really, really grateful. Your story, and I appreciate Scott leaning into it, is so powerful. Grateful for you guys making the sacrifice to be here and taking time to be with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolutely not a sacrifice. And thank you, Doug. And thank you, Scott, for
Thank
having
you.
me and being partners to Glasswing as well.
Absolutely.
You're an incredible group.
Clearly, Chris Pate and the team on the investment team are choosing wise partners.
Yeah.
So thankful.
Yep. Chris.
Thankful
and
for you
Bruno.
spending time with Decision Points. Have a great day.
Thank you. You as well.